Welcome everyone to another Keats Shelley Association of America video interview. If you want to find more about the K-SAA and even join us, then please go to our website at k-saa.org. It starts at just $25 a year and includes a subscription to the Keats Shelley Journal. But to the point of our video interview today, our communications fellow Amy Wilcoxon is interviewing the curator and director of the Keats Shelley House in Rome, Dr. Giuseppe Albano. Giuseppe has received an MBE for his services to UK-Italy relations. He studied English literature at the University of Edinburgh before undertaking postgraduate work at York and then Sydney Sussex College, University of Cambridge, where he wrote his doctoral thesis on Victorian pastoral poetry. He has previously worked in various arts institutions, including the British Museum, Wallace Collection, and the Hornthordian International Writers' Retreat, where he was a librarian and archivist. The K-SAA has often collaborated with the House in Rome, and most recently, the House very kindly offered our members a virtual tour. We're delighted to get to speak to Giuseppe today, just a few months after the bicentenary of John Keats's death, and actually 13 months to the day ahead of the bicentenary of Percy Bysshe Shelley's death. So it's the 8th of June today, and we're 13 months ahead of the 8th of July 2022, which is going to be a big moment for the House, I'm sure. Asking the questions today is the K-SAA's resident archive expert, Amy Wilcoxon. Amy is a PhD researcher at the University of Nottingham, editing the letters of the Scottish Romantic poet, Thomas Campbell. I'll pass over to Amy now to begin the interview. Thank you, Amy.
Thanks so much, Anna, and thank you so much, Giuseppe, for joining us today. I can't tell you how excited I am to get the chance to chat to you and hear all about your work at the Keats Shelley House. So I thought I'd begin by asking you if you could give us a really brief introduction to the house, kind of what items and artifacts are held there, where are you located, things like that.
Thank you, Amy. Yes, well, the museum is located in the very center of Rome, by the Spanish Steps. For those of you who know Rome will know that it doesn't get more central than that. In Keats's time, it wasn't quite the center of Rome. It was more like the edge of the center of Rome. And many tourists, grand tourists, not so grand tourists, as was Keats's case, but most of the visitors who came to Rome, predominantly from Northern Europe, but they would arrive through the nearby Porta del Popolo, the gate at the Piazza del Popolo, which is a neighboring piazza to the Piazza di Spagna, where the Keats Shelley House is located. But most of the people who came to Rome arrived through that gate, and then they would just find somewhere to lodge in the vicinity. So it was really like a corner of the historic center of Rome back in Keats's time. Now it feels like you're very much in the center, and there's lots of, well, outside of COVID times, there are lots of exciting things going on, and there's lots of luxury shopping and hotels and restaurants. So I suppose the Keats Shelley House is really a remnant of a bygone era. It was 200 years ago a simple lodging house. It's not a grand palace. It's not a stunning palazzo. It's a very simple, humble building just at the foot of the Spanish Steps, which was a pensione, as we say in Italian. And Keats came to lodge here. Many others did through the course of the 19th century after him. And then at the beginning of the 20th century, it was threatened with demolition, and a luxury hotel was planned for the very site where the Keats Shelley House is. Thankfully, that never happened, because a group of prominent individuals from Britain, from America, and also from Italy got together, and through their collaborative efforts and with the goodwill of the King of England, the King of Italy, and President Roosevelt of the USA, so it was really a joint international effort. The Keats Shelley Memorial Association was created and survives to this day. So that was more than 100 years ago. Just to frame things, it's 200 years ago since Keats came here, and as Anna pointed out at the beginning, died here. We just marked the bicentenary of his death. And it's just over 100 years since the Keats Shelley Memorial Association was created to raise funds for the house, to turn it into a museum. And we've been here ever since that time. And inside the museum, what people will find is a collection of, well, let's say not a collection of great works of art. What they will find is a collection of manuscripts, relics. There's a library of about 8,500 volumes containing first editions, interesting illustrated editions of the poets, the first Italian translations of Keats, Shelley, Byron, and others into Italian. As well as lots of things pertaining to their lives, mementos of their experiences in Italy, of their travels, letters sent from Keats, Shelley, Byron, Mary Shelley, and others. The museum is dedicated principally to Keats, who died in a little room on the second floor of the house, but also to Percy Bysshe Shelley, because he is also buried in Rome, as is Keats, in the non-Catholic cemetery. In fact, just an aside, I should point out, the reason we're called the Keats Shelley Memorial Association and not the Keats Shelley Byron, Polidori, Wordsworth, and all the others who came to Rome, the reason we're not called that is simply because Keats and John Keats and Percy Bysshe Shelley are both buried in the city of Rome in the non-Catholic cemetery. And when the charity was created all those years ago, it was also created to look after the house and to create the museum, but also to help preserve the tombs of the poets, both of whom were buried in Rome. So that's the kind of things that people will find. People are very surprised when they come, especially Italian visitors when they come to visit us, because I suppose they're used to seeing these very grand palazzi with their piano nobile and all their historic furnishings and their very high ceilings. And when they come to see us, they just see a very simple building with low ceilings, painted flowers on wood, which is really the poor man's version of the Baroque ceilings that you see all over the city. And you'll see this beautiful library, which was designed in the first decade of the 20th century, so not in Keats's time, but during the process of transforming the house into a museum. And people are just so surprised to find something so simple and so beautiful, and something so visceral that connects them with Keats and with the second generation Romantic poets. Yeah. So that's who we are.
Yeah, that's amazing. I remember when I visited, I was really struck by just how beautiful it was. The view as well out on the steps is just amazing. And the view Keats must have had when he was looking out his window, I guess, is just amazing.
Yes, that's true. In fact, the views are one of the things, they haven't changed all that much over the decades. Some of the buildings have been heightened, they've added new floors on, but pretty much if you come to stand in the room, which many people who visit the house want to stand in the room where Keats died, and they want to see what Keats saw, that's pretty much the view hasn't changed that much since Keats's time.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and you're so lucky to be able to work there and be there all the time, I guess. And this leads me on to my next question. I'm always really fascinated by this. Can you give us some insider info about your job? So what's the best thing about being the curator and director of Keats Shelley House?
Oh, goodness. Well, I should say no job is ever what it seems on the outside, I don't think. So, and my job is no different. In fact, it's very eclectic. Which I think is a blessing in many ways, because I never get bored. No 2 days are the same. And in fact, it would be nice if I could sit all day and pour through manuscripts and read the handsome editions, the beautiful bound volumes that we have in the library. That's maybe 1% of the job, if I'm lucky. Because in fact, it's a small museum, which is in many ways a global operation, because we are cared for by British charity. So we have lots of activities in the UK. We publish a journal called the Keats Shelley Review, which is the sister journal to the Keats Shelley Journal, which is published in the USA. And we also have literary prizes that we run every year. We have lots of outreach, which I think we'll maybe talk about later, for young people and for children. We're very active on social media, of course. That's the fun part, if you like, of the job. The less fun part is being a small museum with a small number of staff. The curator has to be really responsible for everything. So I'm responsible for all of the financial reporting, the security, the staff, making sure that the staff get to work, that we have the shifts covered, making sure that the team is motivated, which has been particularly challenging through COVID times, which I've no doubt you're going to ask me about later. But that's that's perhaps the more challenging part. But it's very, very exciting in many ways. It's an honor to be, in a way, representing British poets, British history, British literature in Italy. There is very much a diplomatic side. That sounds very pompous. I don't mean it to sound like that, but there is an element of diplomacy involved in the job as well. Because when people come, especially when Italian visitors come to visit the museum, they want to really discover something about the British Romantic poets, the English Romantic poets. So that's really what it's all about. Plus, in recent months, well, in the past year, really, we've really had to, like many museums, we've really had to diversify and to branch out and to try things that hadn't occurred to us to try before. So we're now doing things, we're now serving teas, for example, on the terrace that we hadn't thought about doing before. I would say about a third of our visits, even though the museum is open again, about a third of our visits are online visits. So lots of people are visiting us virtually with a live guide present using technology that we created and launched for the bicentenary of Keats's death on our own video conferencing platform. So the job is changing constantly, and there are always new challenges involved. Yeah. Probably my least favorite part is the accounts, having to present all the financial information to the committees in Rome and in London. But it's a necessary evil.
I can imagine. No, I think I just got this vision of you sitting in that beautiful library, as you say, just pouring through all the nice books all day, which I thought sounded great. But no, that's.
I do that at night when the museum closes.
Yeah. That's fair enough. No, I do that as well. I just sit in there for hours, I think. But yeah, you've just touched briefly on the move to online and sort of what you've had to do to diversify over the last year. And obviously it's been really difficult, as you've said, for many heritage attractions, but particularly, I guess, for the Keats Shelley House, because you had to close during the Keats bicentenary year as well for much of it. So how did the kind of move to online affect your plans for celebrations? I mean, as you've said, there have been some positives. As Anna said at the beginning, the Keats Shelley Association members were treated to a really amazing virtual tour that I came on as well, and I really enjoyed it. So I just wondered if you could tell us more about that.
Well, it was a surprise, of course, to all of us. I remember very clearly in February 2020, we launched the Keats Shelley 200 initiative in London. There we all were sipping champagne in the residence of the Italian ambassador in London. And just a few weeks later, we had this horrific pandemic which had started. And then we also had the lockdown and restrictions in Italy. As you probably remember, Italy was really at the forefront. It was the epicenter of infections for a while. And it was also the first country certainly in the West to introduce lockdowns, which were unprecedented. Nobody had done that, certainly not in modern history. It had never been tried before. So it was a very alarming time, and it really sent shockwaves through everybody working in the heritage sector in Italy. Especially, I mean, if you think about it, in Italy, in 2019, just to give you an example, in 2019, 90% of revenues for all Italian museums came from entrance tickets. So it was really very alarming for people. How are we going to survive this? But it was also a wake-up call in many ways, and it shook many of us out of our complacency. Again, using statistics that I got from the Office for National Statistics in Italy, in 2019, just prior to the pandemic, just over 50% of Italian museums had a website, which means that just under 50% of them didn't have a website, and just over 50%, I think 53%, had a presence on social media, which means, of course, that many didn't. At the same time, just 1 in 10 museums in Italy were actively engaged in digitizing and cataloging their collections, which means that most of their unique heritage, some of which is very, very precious to world heritage, not just to Italy and to Europe, was uncatalogued. So it was a real shake-up for many organizations in Italy as well. I think many of us had been or had become complacent. We just thought that there would be an endless, continuous stream of tourism, people coming to see Rome, people coming to see Italy. And then when COVID arrived, we realized that's not the case. We have to all think of new ways of reaching people, of making sure that our collections are seen and appreciated, and making sure that the institutions survive. So it was a wake-up call, and the Keats Shelley House was no different from other museums in this respect. I wouldn't say we were exactly at the vanguard of virtual visiting and digital outreach. We certainly were not the worst. You know, we were actually quite fortunate because we were already preparing a new website to launch as part of our Keats Shelley 200 campaign. So having the quiet time during the lockdown gave us the impetus to finish that work that already started. But we also started experimenting with lots of other initiatives. We launched online creative writing seminars with some of the poets that we regularly work with, who'd done creative writing tuition on site at the museum before, but we were now started doing those online. We launched the online panoramic tour with a live guide that was done for the bicentenary, along with various other immersive video projects that we got finished on time for the bicentenary. Using the friends, some of the high-profile friends of the Keats Shelley Memorial Association, like Bob Geldof, who was amazing. He did so much for us, far more than we could ever have hoped for. So people were very eager to help out, both in terms of raising money, raising morale, and raising awareness for the museum. So we were in a better position than many museums were. But I would say, I don't want to romanticize COVID because it's a horrific thing. It's been a devastating pandemic, and the effects of the lockdown and the restrictions have been absolutely morally and financially devastating for many organizations, for many heritage organizations. In fact, ironically, before COVID, many in the sector, in the heritage sector, were worried that about the damage that mass tourism was doing to heritage. But in fact, of course, the sudden lack of tourism potentially does more damage to heritage than not having, than the tourism ever could. So it was a real shake-up for us. And I don't want to romanticize things, and I don't want to put a positive spin on things because it has been horrendous. But in a way, there are some positives because it was a wake-up call, and we worked ever harder to reach new audiences and to make sure that the people that we worked with, the visitors that would come to the house, were still engaged online. And I think the saddest thing for us really was the absence of young people during the pandemic, the absence of school groups coming to visit the museum, even when the museum was able to reopen up in May of last year for some months before being closed again, then reopening and then closing again. Unfortunately, it's been opening and closing non-stop for the last few months. But even while the museum was open, we didn't have any school groups. And that for us was a very sad thing because 40% of our visitors in a normal year are visiting school groups. So not to have that young energy in the museum was very sad, especially as you know, the poets are forever associated with youth. So not to have that suddenly was very sad. So creating the panoramic tour in particular was a really important thing for us to do in order to reconnect with those school groups and to maintain their interest.
Yeah, you've actually preempted my next question a little bit, because
Sorry.
I was going to talk about, I know, as you said, you do a lot of work with schools, both outreach and in the museum, and you've got really excellent reputation for engaging with these young people. So I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about the outreach schemes. I know you've got some poetry schemes, I think, poetry prizes as well, and what the Keats Shelley House is currently doing to engage younger visitors with the Romantic poets.
Well, we have the tours, the online tours, as I mentioned. Most of the things that we did, most of the things that we did prior to COVID, we're still doing. Of course, we're just working harder to make sure the outreach is greater, such as the poetry competition that was launched in 1991, so it's now in its 30th year. That is a poetry competition, a bilingual poetry competition for predominantly Italian school students, and it was the first of its kind, a bilingual English-Italian creative writing contest to be launched in Italy 3 decades ago. So we're still doing that, and we get ever higher numbers of entrants. We also have a handling collection that we do with smaller groups that come to visit the museum, so they can have their standard school visit where we can have up to 25 at a time, and they receive a talk, and then they visit the museum and they have treasure hunts. But we also have created a handling collection that smaller groups of students can look at and enjoy. We've also done, that's with the traditional school group demographic, but we've also worked with other kinds of groups as well. We've worked a lot with refugee centres, and we've created quite a tidy programme for refugees and for migrants to come and to learn about the stories of the poets. And that's been very very rewarding for particularly for the guides involved, because of course many aspects of the stories of Keats, of Shelley, of Byron, refugees can relate to, and it's something that they can understand. So it's not just about the school groups; it's about all kinds of groups. We work also with university groups. We've actually had a lot of university groups for the online panoramic tour, and lots of academics, including, as Anna mentioned, the Keats Shelley Association of America, who we hosted recently. But that's the kind of things that we are doing, much as we've always done, but just with a more digital focus.
Yeah, it all sounds amazing. And obviously with this digital, you can reach people all over the world, I guess, which is amazing. And Keats Shelley House does hold a really unique position, of course, because it's based in Rome, but it's a British museum based in Rome, right? If I'm right.
That's right, yes. So the museum and the collections are, let's say, for accounting purposes, the property of the Keats Shelley Memorial Association,
yeah.
which is a British charity. The patron is His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales. And we have a committee of trustees, a board of trustees, which is like a board of directors, but for a charity.
Yeah.
And they meet in London. And they traditionally are more involved with let's say, the outreach side of things, the fundraising and outreach. While we also have the museum in Rome, which is, if you like, the earned income wing of the charity. So the fundraising is mostly done from London, whereas the money coming in from ticket sales and from the online shop and the gift shop, that all comes through Rome. So let's say we get by,
Yeah.
But it's with great effort. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, it's really, since the beginning, it's been a collaborative effort with British, with Italian, and also with Americans as well, who've helped us since the start.
Yeah. How is the Keats Shelley House kind of connecting with these audiences around the world? Is it through the virtual tours that you've mentioned and through all these outreach programs? Are they reaching people in the US, for example, as well?
I hope so. Yes. Well, that's what we're trying to do. It's I suppose it's easier said than done. Obviously, social media plays, has a major significance in all of this. We've noticed that. For example, on Facebook, we have a lot of followers from South Asia, from India, from Bangladesh, and from Pakistan, which is very interesting. Twitter seems to be a little bit more Anglophone, whereas Instagram, we have lots of the people who come for the school visits, who are based in Italy and based in Rome. They maybe come to visit the museum virtually or in person, and then afterwards they follow us on Instagram. So social media is very important, but really we're trying to build a portfolio of digital projects that we launched in February this year with the bicentenary of Keats's death, with the immersive video projects that were narrated for us by Bob Geldof. And we're continuing in that vein, as well as the panoramic tour, of course, which we've mentioned, but we are continuing in that vein. And over the next few years, we have the bicentenary of Shelley's death, 30 months today, as we said earlier. And in 2 years' time, we have 2 years after that, we have the bicentenary of Byron's death. So we're creating a program over the next few years of, ideally, ever bolder digital projects in order to try to engage people across the world. We've experimented a lot with well, not a lot, but we are experimenting with VR and augmented reality and mixed reality for the next project. And we incorporated some VR elements into the projects that we launched for Keats's bicentenary. The challenge is that we have we have audiences who are very technologically advanced, particularly in the Far East, where everybody has a VR headset. I mean, just about everybody has one. Whereas in Italy, things, of course, are a lot more traditional. So we're trying to create projects that satisfy both traditional viewers, traditional learners, as well as people with the up-to-date technology. That's the challenge.
That sounds great. And relating to kind of what you're doing over the next few years, have you got any kind of specific exhibitions taking place or plans to celebrate the upcoming bicentenaries? Are these all things that are in the pipeline, as you say?
Oh yes, yes, of course. I think the exhibitions are very, very important. We've just closed one. In fact, we opened an exhibition at the end of October of paintings, of contemporary artworks, which is just closed. We had to extend it because of the repeated lockdowns that we've had in Rome. And we are planning an exhibition for next year, which will focus on Adonais as a foundational text in the creation of the Keats Shelley legacy. We'd originally planned to do that this year for the bicentenary of the publication of Adonais, but it made sense for many reasons to postpone it to next spring, which we will do. The working title of that is Adonais, the Intertwining Legacies of Keats and Shelley. I think real exhibitions, on-site activities, all of these things are very important. I think the museum, nothing will ever replace the experience of visiting the museum. As I mentioned earlier, most people come here, they want to physically stand in the room where Keats died, where he drew his last breath, and look out of the windows and touch the fireplace where Joseph Seven cooked meals for Keats, and they want to have that experience. I don't think that will ever be replaced, although, of course, we have seen fewer visitor numbers for obvious reasons over the last year. So it's very important that we continue with the exhibitions on site, and we continue with poetry readings, which will be starting again next month. At the same time, we are doing more collaborative projects with our partners in the UK, all over Europe, in the USA. In fact, again, I don't really like putting a romantic spin on the pandemic, but another advantage that has come out of this crisis is that I think there's more spirit of collaboration now, especially the culture of online meetings and sharing ideas. I mean, that's been fabulous over the last few months when we were doing the bicentenary of Keats's death. There was just so much discussion and everyone was sharing their ideas rather than organizations selfishly tending to their own projects. There's been more discussion. And I think I hope that's going to be continuing with the bicentenary of Shelley's death next year. In fact, we've had some really engaging discussions with Anna and with the Keats Shelley Association of America, with Neil Freystadt, and about what we're going to do. And I think that's all really exciting things to look forward to. So if we will learn something, we will take something good from the crisis the last year, and that is more collaboration. It's never been easier to meet and to talk, as we can see today. This, and we will have more immersive video projects. We're currently planning one that we hope will be ready by October this year, which will look at Shelley in Rome, and which will explore some of the key texts that were inspired by the city of Rome, that Shelley wrote, as well as some of the letters that he wrote describing the experience of being in Rome. And we will try to bring to life through simulation, VR simulation, as well as panoramic sound, the experience of Rome as Shelley might have seen it. And central to all of this will be Joseph Severn's painting of Shelley composing Prometheus Unbound in the Baths of Caracalla, which is part of the collection of the Keats Shelley House. We will be bringing that to life in a modern day simulation. So there are exciting things ahead.
That all sounds incredible. I can't wait to come. I think I say this every time I speak to somebody from a museum. I can't wait to come and visit. And after I've heard all these amazing things that you're doing, as soon as we're able to come to Rome, then I'm sure we all will be. I've got one final question for you, and it's a bit of a cheeky one. But Keats or Shelley? Which one's your favourite, or which one would you choose?
You know, it's funny. I would say until this time last year, I would have said Shelley, but having gone through the bicentenary of Keats' death, it's really changed my relationship with Keats and his work. I feel so much more intimately connected with Keats now than I did before. That said, this time next year or 13 months from now, it might be back to Shelley again.
I was going to say, after you've gone through the Shelley bicentenary, you'll be like, I quite like
But
Shelley again now. Yeah.
It will never, I'm not sure it will ever be Byron.
No, oh yeah, fair enough. I mean, I quite like Byron, but no, I agree. Well, thank you so much, Giuseppe, for chatting to us today. I've had an absolute ball listening to all your answers, and yeah, thank you for joining us. I'll pass back over to Anna.
Thank you, Amy, and huge thank you to Giuseppe for such a fascinating interview. I think everyone should get their virtual tour booked if they haven't already. And I also can vouch for the fact that the Keats Shelley online shop is great too if you want some good Keats Shelley merchandise. Follow the hashtags Keats Shelley 200 and Shelley 200 on Twitter for more leading up to the Shelley bicentenary in particular. I'm sure the house will be sharing lots of information on their Twitter page. And we'll make sure we link to the website for the Keats Shelley House in Rome in the information under this video, so you can find all the stuff that Giuseppe was talking about. I'm particularly excited for the intertwining legacies of Keats and Shelley as an exhibition. That sounds fascinating, so exciting. But just thank you once again to Giuseppe, and thank you for listening, and look out for another Keats Shelley Association of America interview very soon. Thank you.